Welcome everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. I'm going to turn it over to translation to start us off.
Everyone, today we will be practicing language justice in this space by providing Spanish interpretation and closed captioning in English. At its core, language justice is the right we each have to communicate in the language in which we feel most powerful. We recognize the limitations of our practice, as today we are only providing Spanish interpretation and closed captioning in English, and there may be other languages and language access needs represented on this call.
Vamos a practicar la justicia del lenguaje en este espacio proveyendo interpretación al español. En su núcleo, la justicia del lenguaje es el derecho que todos tenemos de comunicarnos en el lenguaje en el que nos sentimos más poderosos. Reconocemos las limitaciones de nuestra práctica, ya que hoy solo estaremos proveyendo interpretación al español y puede que haya otros idiomas o necesidades de acceso al idioma representados en la llamada.
I recognize that language is a place of connection, but also a place of trauma.
Reconocemos que el idioma es un lugar de conexión, pero también es uno de trauma.
We recognize the loss of languages. We recognize the fact that the cities where we live and work are in indigenous lands and that colonization has erased thousands of languages.
Reconocemos el hecho de que las ciudades en las que vivimos y trabajamos están en tierras indígenas y que la colonización ha borrado miles de idiomas.
We recognize the loss of languages due to slavery and the fact that today many of us do not speak the language of our ancestors.
Reconocemos la pérdida de idiomas debido a la esclavitud y el hecho de que hoy muchos de nosotros no hablamos el idioma de nuestros ancestros.
Language justice is rooted in a history of resistance by communities and peoples whose voices have been silenced for generations. And to practice language justice is to focus on decolonization and a healing approach to language.
La justicia del lenguaje está enraizada en una historia de resistencia por comunidades y pueblos cuyas voces han sido silenciadas por generaciones, y practicar la justicia del lenguaje es enfocarnos en la descolonización y en un enfoque sanador al idioma.
Practicing language justice is everyone's responsibility. As such, we ask that you do your part by speaking slowly and clearly, keeping in mind that Spanish is 30% longer than English.
Practicar la justicia del lenguaje es la responsabilidad de todos. Como tal, te pedimos que hagas tu parte hablando lenta y claramente, teniendo en mente que el español es 30% más largo que el inglés.
If you're listening in Spanish, you might be surprised to hear some words ending in an E that usually end in an A or an O. This is not a mistake, but part of our commitment to using inclusive language.
Si escuchas en español, puede que te sorprenda escuchar algunas palabras terminando en E, que usualmente terminan en A o en O. Esto no es un error, sino parte de nuestro compromiso a usar lenguaje inclusivo. Hoy vamos a usar la función de interpretación de Zoom para proveer la interpretación. Una vez se encienda la función, va a aparecer un globo en la parte inferior de tu pantalla. O si estás en un teléfono celular o tableta, en los 3 puntitos que dicen More o Más, va a haber un menú desplegable y te vas a deslizar a donde dice Interpretación de idiomas. Una vez ahí, seleccionas el idioma inglés o español y puedes poner en silencio el audio original. Si estás en un teléfono móvil o tableta, debes de darle al botón que dice Done o Finalizar una vez hayas seleccionado el idioma para asegurarte que estés en el canal correcto.
Today we'll be using the Zoom interpretation feature, and when the feature is turned on, you will see a small globe appear at the bottom of your screen. You will click on that globe and be able to select your language, either English or Spanish. If you're joining us from a cell phone or a tablet, you will not see the globe. Instead, you will click on the 3 dots that say More and select Language Interpretation from the drop-down menu. You will then be able to choose your language, and you must click Done to ensure that you're in the right channel. You will also have the option of silencing the original audio. Thank you.
Gracias, and thank you, Margo Ivero, for your interpretation today. We want to review a few other housekeeping items before we get started. You can access closed captioning by clicking the Show Captions button in the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom window. And also in the menu bar, you can use the Zoom Q&A feature to ask questions of our panelists today. We'll gather these questions and lift up as many as we can after our moderated discussion. This session is being recorded, and as a webinar recording will be sent out to all participants afterwards, as well as be posted on our YouTube page. And finally, you can find the full Powerful Partnerships video series at HIP's website at humanimpact.org/powerfulpartnershipsvideos.
Thank you, Rebekah. And thank you all for joining us today. From all of us at HIP, we deeply appreciate your presence, particularly given the immensity of this time, the profound challenges we face, and the events unfolding across the ocean. In this moment, we want to recognize the stolen and indigenous lands many of us reside on as we engage in this conversation and the vital equity work ahead of us. We honor this practice of land acknowledgements to lift up the original stewards of this land we occupy and acknowledge that these communities are still here and thriving in the places we now also call home. It is a way of showing respect and a step towards correcting the stories and practices that erase Indigenous peoples' histories and culture, and towards inviting and honoring the truth. We also live and work in a country that was built on the forced labor and work and stolen lives of enslaved Africans. The current US economy, growth, and development, institutions, and culture are all directly rooted in the systems of slavery, Jim Crow, and continued racial trauma and oppression. We acknowledge and lift up all the people who unwillingly and forcibly gave their labor and lives in the development of what we now know as the United States. We acknowledge and lift up all of their descendants and those who continue to fight for freedom and justice across the country and the world. We cannot forget that our liberation is mutually linked and that no one is free until we are all free. Thank you. My name is Selma Ali. I am with the Human Impact Partners, calling in from unceded Potawatomi land, also known as Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And I am Rebekah Gowler. I use she pronouns. I reside and work on the unceded lands of the Dakota people in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am a project director on the capacity building team at HIP. HIP is a national nonprofit headquartered in the Bay Area of California with staff across the country. Our mission is to transform the field of public health to center equity and build collective power with social justice movements. We advance this mission in a few ways: through capacity building, training, and technical assistance with health departments and other public health organizations, through policy, advocacy, and organizing efforts, connecting directly with community power building organizations to advance transformative policy solutions that center health and equity. Some of our focus areas include community safety, economic justice, housing justice, and climate justice. And we work to build collective power through bridging work and relationships across health departments and community power building organizations, similar to the stories that will be shared here through the Powerful Partnerships videos and our panelists. So how will we spend our time together today? Well, first, we will have some brief framing and to help us ground in why we are here today. Then we will introduce our amazing panelists and facilitate a discussion with them about their partnerships and the work they are doing in their communities. And then we'll bring our webinar to a close with resources for further learning. Thank you so much for being with us today. And now Selma will get us grounded for our discussion.
Thank you so much, Rebekah. In the spirit of the enduring words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "Power, properly understood, is nothing but the ability to achieve a purpose," we are pleased to welcome you to our webinar on the transformative potential of narratives in cultivating and redistributing power within communities. We wanted to begin our time together today level setting around the intricate relationship between power, narrative, and community engagement, emphasizing the significance of storytelling as a dynamic force that shapes our understanding of societal structures. The topic of storytelling is as old as culture itself, and story work is deeply rooted in ancestral and cultural traditions. It is important that we are reminded, inspired by, and honor the oral storytelling that is a cultural practice of Native American traditions, as well as many other of our ancestors. Understanding the rich history emphasizes the critical role narratives play, that they are not just stories, but tools for healing, and as a practice that builds power to dismantle racist, colonialist, and other oppressive structures. For me, in my public health practice, as well as my organizing, narrative work is necessary for making health equity a verb and an action. When done strategically, intentionally, and in partnership with community, narratives can center and grow the power of people most impacted by injustices to advocate for and lead change in our communities. During our time together, we will explore 3 partnerships that were highlighted as part of the Powerful Partnerships for Healthy Communities video series. Get ready to immerse yourself in their story and gain insights into their collaborative efforts, with a strong emphasis on the pivotal role of community-driven initiatives. We will examine the critical need for government support in amplifying community voices and fostering an environment where power is shared, not concentrated. We believe that by embracing the power of narrative and collectively sharing our experiences and endeavors, we can strengthen the foundation of equitable governance and pave the way for a more just and inclusive future. Thank you again for joining us, and please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Thank you so much, Selma. I'm so excited to welcome our panelists today. We'll bring on each team of panelists first with a brief clip from their video, and then the team members will introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how their partnership got started. So first, we'll bring on the team from Washington State.
I believe that power is useless unless it's shared. Power only does good if people come together to use it for good. It's really necessary that we not just listen to people, but that we give people authority. Are we willing to go so far as to let our participants design our program? I think ideally that's what we should do. But in order to get there, we're going to have to overcome a lot of personal resistance, and we're going to have to overcome institutional resistance.
When you're working in racial equity and social justice, you have to have relationships. You have to be able to talk your truths. There needs to be some trust there. It really means taking an internal look at yourself, taking an internal look at the things you do and how they're affecting the communities that are involved. What is in my power? What are my strengths? What is it that I can do to make this change happen? Everybody needs to be doing this together so that we have a just society where everybody can live, work, and play healthy.
Our program needs to be responsive to everybody. This is a seed, and I really believe that from this seed something beautiful is going to grow. Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Throne. I'm the director of Washington WIC, and it's a privilege to be here with all of you today. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm with the Washington State Department of Health, coming to you from Spokane, Washington.
I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Ford. I use she, her pronouns. I live in University Place, and I'm really grateful to call Tacoma, Washington, my home, where I've also had the privilege of working and playing on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. And at the same time, I recognize the significance in acknowledging the stolen leader that has played a significant role in shaping the Tacoma we know today. And so the complex history has really motivated me to engage in community in a way that fosters awareness and respect for the land and its diverse history. So I work in public health, I have a background in maternal child health, and I will pass it to Delores.
Good morning. My name is Delores Baccus. I use she, her pronouns. I work for Public Health Seattle and King County, which is an agency in Seattle. I currently live in Spanaway, Washington. I was on the original team that started this project. And I will say when we began, we did a lot of team building. When we identified as Washington as being one of the programs we were going to work with, we looked at the structure of Washington WIC, because depending on where you live, WIC is done in different structures where we outsource or we contract with agencies to do the services. And it's not, if you work for WIC, you work for the Department of Health. So we took that structure apart together as a team in the beginning and looked at what potential problems could be and put ourselves in the place of workers or potential participants and what they may be going through, to kind of take an internal look at ourselves and our own biases first, creating those kind of safe places. We partnered with Bird Bar Place, which works with the community and has strong ties in the community. And they were also involved. Leon Garnett was involved. And Leon and I both have strong, the community we worked in was, we identified Tacoma, and we both had connections of people that had worked for WIC previously or had received WIC services and stopped, or qualified for WIC and not getting WIC services. So we wanted to get information from those people of what the problems were, why they weren't receiving services, or if there were issues when they were. So we went in to the communities, to people personally, and had to own personal relationships building to get them to get involved in this, promising some things, making sure that we could ensure that whatever we told them we were going to do, we were going to follow through. And so I would say the most important part of this process to me was the relationships and being able to ensure that what we said we were going to do, we actually were able to do. Didn't make false promises.
Thank you all so much. We will now hear from the team from California.
What has been in the heart of our collaboration with different grassroots organizations is just reminding ourselves that many of the challenges that they bring up, or frustration, has roots on centuries of discrimination and practices that disfranchise them from accessing the resources. If you're going to a meeting and people are rightfully upset, it's not personal. It's showcasing that there is a history that we need to be mindful of.
It really is these individual relationships which are critical, because the information that we were coming with was backed with expertise, was backed with experience. We earned respect among staff. And so there's a lot of institutional mutual respect. We understand each other's expertise.
For Leadership Council, co-empowerment means that we engage with communities in a way that is respectful of the knowledge that they have. They have as much expertise and power as anybody who may work in a community organization or a city council or in the state government.
Projects and programs will not succeed without community leadership, community buy-in, guiding both design and implementation. So Harnas, you want to start, or you would like me to start? My name is Phoebe Seaton with Leadership Council. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in our Sacramento office. Currently, I'm in Davis on Petwin land, and we work, and this will probably come out in the conversation later today, in the San Joaquin and Eastern Coachella valleys. And kind of many of the communities we work in are rural communities. And our relationship with SGC began and has flourished in a lot of ways, because of the rural perspective we bring and fought for in the context of climate change. So one of the baseline kind of issues that we work in is the role of lower income communities of color, and especially rural communities, and how kind of the policies that drive our kind of climate change agenda don't further leave behind lower income, less urbanized areas, which are, in the San Joaquin Valley and Coachella Valley, disproportionately lower income and communities of color. And that was kind of the fundamental kernel of our relationship with the state on this issue. And it really grew through the development and our ability, and the state's kind of embracing our ability to inform development of those programs, including the Transformative Climate Community Program, which is, I think, where a lot of the learning took place on what the kind of the roles, the differing, and we talked about it a little bit in the video, of the role of community and the role of the state in kind of shaping the future of our state, the future of neighborhoods, and how everybody has a critical role in that conversation.
Thank you, Phoebe. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sahar Mirzazad. I'm at the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, which is one of the, SGC is one of the offices I work under during my time at the state service. Our relationship with Leadership Council started before I joined the SGC in 2016, and the organization was one of the main organizations that advocated for programs like Transformative Climate Communities program to support the most disadvantaged communities of California. When the program was shaped and designed, the program focus in the initial 2 rounds was only on incorporated communities. And the reason that we didn't focus on unincorporated communities was the lack of knowledge and understanding how we should approach the issue. Leadership Council, as you heard from Phoebe, has been a great advocate to ensure that these communities will not be left behind, and came to the table as a partner to help us understand how we can meaningfully invest in these communities and support it out throughout the process. And I'm hoping that throughout this webinar, I will provide some information on the challenges that we had from the government side to be able to do this type of investment in a meaningful way, and why this partnership with the Leadership Council was critical to be able to actually move forward our goals in a way that it matters for the communities on the ground. And from the beginning, it wasn't that we didn't care about these communities. The problem was that we didn't know how to approach it. And without organizations like Leadership Council and others who stepped up to support us, we couldn't have done it. So that will be the focus of today for me and my conversation with Phoebe. Appreciate it.
Thank you both so much. And now we'll turn to our team from New Mexico.
Water, Gowler. There's different sayings for it in Zuni. It's one of our most sacred things. We can't live without water. We think water is life, especially coming from a dry climate. There used to be a river here. It used to be free-flowing. People used to walk outside their houses and grab a pot of water. Nowadays, we're in considered a 20-year drought. The ground isn't how it used to be. It's drying up faster and faster. Our local lakes, they're starting to dry up. The only well is 20 miles from Zuni. So if you needed water for your garden, if you needed water for your livestock, you would have to drive 20 miles away. And a lot of people don't have trucks here. Everybody has to deal with the water department, whether it's a broken pipe or something, but they don't see the hard work they put in. They're day in, day out. They bring us our water every day. If we turn on our faucet, that's because of them. Perishing the water we have, they put a policy on no municipal water being used for car washes, pools, and gardens. And that's where we come in. We collect our rainwater here off our roof, and we wanted to branch out and have families be given that opportunity to do so. Rain harvest, it gave them another outlet, not just to be the people that get us water, but the people that help us save water.
I believe, we all play a different role.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Zachary James. My pronouns are he, him. I am from the Zuni Youth Enrichment Project, which is located in northwestern New Mexico at the heart of the Zuni Pueblo. And I just want to say it's an honor to be here. And I'm so excited to share what we've done as an organization and as a community.
My name is Curtis Quam. I'm also part of the Zuni Youth Enrichment Project's agricultural committee, and also the lead for the museum here. And yeah, just honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Curtis. Our partnership began years before ZYP was formed. It's been in our genes and our traditions and cultures to collaborate with each other. So surrounding one big important aspect is water. Zuni is in the middle of nowhere. We don't have luxurious oceans nearby. We survive off one well, and the need for water and then the importance of knowing to conserve your water is what brought us three departments together. The Zuni Utility Department, they directly supervise and distribute water to over 1,500 families. ZYEP were direct ways to connect to the youth, and the Zuni Public School District, of course, they teach our youth in a way. So if we had the hopes of revitalizing our community through water and unity by powering together, because water is life, and water will continue to guide us in the right way. Thank you again.
Thank you both so much. It's such a pleasure to have everyone here. We're excited to get started with our discussion. So we know that power is so foundational to all of the work that you all are doing in partnership and in your communities. And so Zachary, I'm going to turn to you first. Would love to hear how you build community power in your role using your specific forms of power.
I think of power as unity. The more people you have on your side, the more you can get stuff done with. As a community role in our Pueblo, we do a lot of youth engagement. We engage with elders, we engage with adults. So bringing the different generations together to support our cause. That's the biggest portion of this. I think that definitely as a whole community, we can really change what's in store for us. The continuous relationships built between our organizations and our community members is so important to each other, because Zuni is a really small community. Everybody knows each other here. So the importance of being able to trust your neighbors, trust your family. We're one big family that help each other out, and has that driving power as well.
Thank you so much. So Harnaz, I'd like to call you in as well about building community power in your role and how you use your specific forms of power to do that.
So one of the things that I should mention is reaching out to communities doesn't really matter unless you gave them the decision power making. And one of the things that we exercised during the early days of Transformative Climate Communities program is that how we can build that into the structure of the program, that the community power and the decision-making power stays throughout the process, and not only the beginning or the end, but actually like maintain that relationship with the community. They will have a say. One of the, I believe, one of the transformational aspects of the Transformative Climate Communities program was that we created a stakeholder structure that was tasked from the beginning to help the visioning of the process, selection of the project, and also implementation of the projects. And they had the role to oversight of the implementation throughout the process. And it was built into the contract that we had with the agency who was receiving the money on our behalf. And we tried as a staff to attend some of those meetings and observe, make sure that that's a real forum for conversation, and the recipients of our grants are taking the community feedback seriously. If there was any major changes that was supposed to happen throughout the grant, this was supposed to be vetted by this stakeholder structure and ensure that they are on board with that changes. And this was really a transformative approach for the program. It helped us to shift the power from us as a government and from the receiving entity, that in many cases is the local jurisdiction, to the people who are benefiting from the project to have a say in how the decisions are made. And I should mention that this has been beneficial in so many ways, that provided a different approach for local governments to understand the value of having their communities in the decision-making process, as many of these communities had a very hostile relationship with their local governments. I think that's has been very important. On the specifically related to the disadvantaged unincorporated communities, one of the things that I would like to mention is we had this committee that supported us to develop the framework for investment. And it was different stakeholders that participated up through the process. Some community members, different community-based organizations, nonprofits who worked in this space, and having their say throughout the process and making sure that the framework that we develop is supported by them, and they have a clear way of providing comments and being part of the structuring that framework, help us to get broader buy-in in the state level. And also when we posted that for public comments as required by law for us, we got a lot of good feedback as a result of that, and also helped us to reach a larger population of the state who were not part of that. As a result of our collaboration with these different stakeholders, they were able to disseminate it and even help us improve that framework further. So those are the things that comes to my mind currently, but I'm sure there are other things that we can talk about.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Leah, what would you share about building power in your community using your own specific forms of?
Yeah, I feel like when I show up, I actively work to empower and build community power through a variety of different means. I firmly believe in the collective strength and potential of our community, and by fostering collaborative leadership and sharing information and building individual and group capacity, I think in addition to layering in network opportunities and advocating for community needs, I really try to create a platform where community members can be active participants in shaping their own destiny. It's really about recognizing and respecting the unique and diverse forms of power that reside within our community, and harnessing them to drive positive change and enhance the well-being of all involved. Connected to this program or this project in particular, my former role as a peer counselor at WIC, I really recognized the need to really cultivate that community power in order to more effectively support Black families who were consistently underserved and their voices were not valued. And I really took time to enhance my educational power. Often as folks of color, we can get tokenized, and like my experience as a Black woman, and someone can check that box and be like, there you go, that we did it. Versus I really made sure I made a dedicated effort to educate myself about challenges that families in my area were facing when looking to access, and also those who are receiving WIC services. And I think that really helped create a foundation for better understanding of overall general needs and concerns that folks had when engaging with that. I would facilitate like a support group, and really gave me additional opportunities to be in community and hear and learn from other families and their experiences. And then since I was working within a system at that time, I would really capitalize on like advocacy and networking opportunities as often as I could. That role as a peer counselor is kind of seen as like a para-educator and not a high valued, sadly, position within an organization. So I did what I can to, connect with other professionals and organizations that were committed to addressing the experiences that families faced, and really ensured in my conversations that I was centering the experiences of communities of color. And I think those active like networking and advocating opportunities really helped elevate voices of color within those systems. And I think overall, just like being in community, that's huge for me. It's really who I am, and active community engagement is always a strategy that I will utilize. I just immerse myself in the community. I participate in local events and initiatives, and I think that active engagement really helps bridge community and certain programs that agencies are really trying to serve. And I think obviously there's different forms of influence depending on what role you're serving, but just centering equity, inclusion, and acknowledging that the process of building community power is ongoing. And I'll be doing this work forever.
Yeah, thanks so much. Leah, I loved how you talked about harnessing collective power for change, for transformative change. And so we'd love to hear more about what change efforts, what change you all were able to realize through your partnerships, what impact you had. So if folks could share about any policies, practices, changes in the ways that you all do things that are a result of the work that you all are doing in partnership together. So Harnaz, I'm going to come back to you for this one.
Rebekah, my internet got like, I need you to repeat it. I didn't hear you for a couple seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to hear about the impact that your partnerships had. So any new policies, practices, ways of being and doing together that were a result of this work.
The result of the collaboration with the Leadership Council on Disadvantaged Unincorporated Communities was the first investment framework for these communities that was developed by the state. Prior to that, the state didn't have really a good approach on how to invest in unincorporated communities, unlike what we had in cities across the states. One of the challenges that we faced when we were initially trying to have our investment in unincorporated communities, we noticed that there are some fundamental needs that these communities lack, that even our investment will not be able to address those. These communities were lacking basic infrastructure like access to water, sewer, and us coming in with investment in green space or bike path and all of that wouldn't really resolve some of those fundamental issues that they had. And when we developed this framework, it gave us the opportunity to actually look for the opportunities to address some of those fundamental challenges that these communities are facing. Also bringing up some of the injustices that these communities have faced throughout the time, but putting it in a framework that the lack of representation from these communities that in California are mostly undocumented immigrants has exacerbated the situation, that their voice haven't been heard from legislators, from us in the state level, to be able to actually give them the resources that they need. So it has been very powerful collaboration, and the framework that we developed together with Leadership Council, with support of PU, has been referenced in multiple other state programs, and they have been looking into it to see how they can meaningfully support these communities across the state. And I think that it's not without flaws. I'm sure that this could be better and it could be improved throughout the time, but this was the first step to acknowledge all those shortcomings and try and attempt to address it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, thanks for that. Phoebe, what would you add?
I think, you know, Saharna's kind of summarized both pieces really well. I thought both the kind of the substantive policy change, which I'll go into a little bit more detail about, and the kind of culture of decision making. So on the substantive change, you know, we've thrown around this word before. So just to unincorporated communities are those communities that are not it's not the same throughout the country. In California, it's anywhere that's not an incorporated city. And so, as Saharnas mentioned, there's these like huge gaps in municipal services and government representation, which are interconnected, which is not going to be surprising to any of the 178 participants here, often falls along you know, income and race lines and ethnicity lines, where there's disproportionate exclusion from representation and like these real basic services and like more advanced amenities in unincorporated communities. And one of and kind of related to that is, with this lack of services, lack of representation, is lack of information and data. We worked in one community, which we're right now the site of a hopefully, fingers crossed, transformative climate community program many years ago, and the state senator wrote to us and said, we just heard that you're working in a community that looks like it's in our district and we've never heard of it. So the kind of neglect and exclusion is really, really deep. And so unfortunately, I won't sugarcoat it, in the initial phases of this really, really important program to address root causes of inequality and climate resilience, unincorporated communities were left out. The Strategic Growth Council left them out, in part because of this issue around data. And really important change was making sure that communities and unincorporated communities could apply. And now I think with kind of further, you know, looking at the program further, there's other built-in obstacles for unincorporated communities to participate. And the Strategic Growth Council has responded to that by kind of shifting some of the program guidelines and making sure those communities that are you know, smaller and less able to apply or compete, I should say, are better able to compete. So I think there's both the kind of eligibility of unincorporated communities, and then this iterative process that says, okay, what's still missing? How can we continue to improve it, with a very, very inclusive process of doing so?
Thanks for that. And Zachary, coming to you, what impacts have your partnership had in your community?
Yeah, this project definitely has brought the knowledge and need for water conservation in the community. You know, it's so great that our utility department, our water department, already had policies set in about saving water and not wasting their municipal water as a whole. And the school district, along with ZYEP, we have a policy about using rain harvest on our gardens fully. I think it's, you know, bringing the community together and teaching them the importance of having and saving this water that's, you know, fairly hard to find around here. The importance of water is, you know, starting to be instilled in, you know, not only our youth minds, but our elders, our adults. there's over 300 rain barrels in our community, and that's over 3,000 gallons being collected. It's better than 5. Even 5 gallons is amazing. And as we move forward, more policies will be set in place because again, our water supply is going down and people are getting scared. It's scary, but it is the hard truth that we have to face. And the steps we take now in this present day of age is not going to only affect us, but as generations to come.
Appreciate that, Zach. Thank y'all so much for your answers. Now, in talking about successes, we have to also talk about challenges. And this was also a question that comes from the audience as well. In the videos, y'all spoke about challenges you faced. For example, lack of resources, fear of risk taking, the need to face and heal government harms to the community, and community distrust of government. What advice would y'all give others who are managing these same challenges or challenges in general when it comes to these partnerships? Paul or Delores, if y'all.
I think both of us have something to share here. So our project had the goal of reducing health disparities in Pierce County, Washington, among Black birthing families, using WIC as an intervention because we know WIC is supportive. It prevents infant mortality. It provides a better birth outcome for everyone. And we also know that WIC fails to reach Black birthing families and in a disproportionate manner. So we needed to understand why and what can we do differently in WIC. And as the government representative on this project from the WIC program, my challenge was to really come in with humility as a partner who's committed to not controlling or dominating this project. Government has a long history of, at worst, causing harm and at the very least, neglecting communities who have needs that it should be serving. So I wanted to make sure this was an experience that did not cause harm, did not traumatize a community that's already dealing with disproportionate harm. So turning that around, I needed to listen. And that was really, to me, the most important thing. Leah shared so eloquently about the importance of putting in the work to understand the community's needs and about utilizing the community's collective power to make change. And Delores talked earlier about being honest about what's possible and what's realistic. We had another member of our core team, Leon Garnett from Bird Bar Place, talk to us a lot about let's not make promises we can't keep. Let's not set expectations that we can't fulfill. Let's be really realistic and honest with people. Otherwise, we're just breaking another promise. So that was all really important. And then listening has to start from the very beginning, in my opinion. And I have a tendency to talk a lot, but one of the joys of this project for me was really listening and really just taking a side seat and letting the other folks in this project team talk about what they wanted to do and what they thought needed to happen. And the team listened to each other really, really well. One thing that we found very important was to talk about data decolonization. We know that data are generally a colonized aspect of a lot of public health work everywhere. The data do not reflect the communities. The communities have no control over their data. And the data are not decolonized to the extent that they will help us understand what's truly happening. So I'll give you an example. In the world of WIC, we are required to use data that is under the categories that the US Census Bureau has. Those categories are huge. They combine Black and African American families together. They combine Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiian families together. When you combine data like that, you can't really understand what's going on with the community, and it can really mask what the truth. And so we talked a lot about how do we get to the truth in spite of the ways data can mask that truth. Leah and Delores were really trusted partners that reached this community. And I think that was the other lesson for me here as a government partner, is to really turn to trusted partners and ask for help to reach the community in a way that can bridge the world of government and the world of the community and its needs, and showing respect to the community by taking what we hear seriously and committing to learn from it and to make change from it.
I think Paul hit the most important part. I think your partnership with government, I think sometimes we go into projects thinking we're ready to do something, but he was very gracious. He was very open and willing to learn. I think well, I've worked with Paul for a while, so I didn't have that hesitation. But in other projects I've been in, where you have government, there's a fear, and they start going into this work. And when you start hearing some of the things people are going to say or things that might change, they close up because they're really not willing or they're not ready for the change or for the things they're ready to hear. So having relationships or having the groundwork done, that you're willing to be open to hear the ugly that might come out, right? And being able to work together to work through those things.
Thank you so much. The ugly that might come out. I love that. That's the quote of the day. So Harnaz, do you have anything to add?
When I was listening to my colleagues and friends here, I was thinking about the role of data, similar to what you guys have been experiencing. We have run to the similar issue in California with the data, the census data, and lack of information on some of the communities that we're trying to reach. We have a tool for our programs that we use that basically defines the eligibility. And when we looked into the map and some other maps, we noticed that some of those communities fundamentally don't show up, like they're like not there. And we did some investigative work with our partners on the ground to better understand what's going on, and noticed that some of these communities are mobile homes, that we don't have a good information on them. And from there, we went through this whole process of what can we do to have an accurate data for these communities, and actually to basically help them actually show up somewhere, that they exist, they are working in this community, they're living in this community. We had some data in our housing community development department on mobile homes that were actually permitted. We reconciled that with the data that we had, and then we noticed that the unpermitted housing were not there. We had to work with hard to count communities that was developed as a part of our census work in California. It was sort of a separate effort that California took on, and then to get a little bit of a better picture of who lives in our community and who are we planning for. And I totally agree, data plays a very, very important role in our distribution of funds, our decision making and policy making, and making sure that the data has the equity embedded itself, and also ground truthing them and making sure that it's not a barrier for the communities to access our funds is very important.
Definitely. Phoebe, do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I think, the people have talked about it before. The good news and the bad news, it's the tried and true kind of relationships and trusted relationships, which there's no shortcut for, are critically important between organizations and people. There's a lot. It goes both ways in terms of, I think, just relationships. From our perspective, we're an advocacy organization, and local and state and federal agencies have been really irresponsible at best in terms of promoting health and well-being in the communities we work in partnership with, and so that the obvious kind of need to heal derives from that. On the other side, though, I think I will be honest that a lot of the community members and community leaders and organizations that the Strategic Growth Council has worked with and has partnered with at times take very, very antagonistic stances with the state. We're currently, one of the communities we all work in together, we're representing in litigation against the state around freeway expansions. And so having the trusted relationships and the openness for an agency to say, like, okay, we're not always going to agree on this. We can agree. We can really, really work together, and kind of find commonalities, even when it's not all bright and rosy, is really important.
That's a really great point, Phoebe. What that brings up for me is the way the discomfort that comes with this work, and the leaning into conflict when it arises, in order to come to that compromise. Really appreciate that answer. Thank you. So moving forward, right? In thinking about the future, what is your hope for your partnership, and what might these relationships and early wins build for the future? What will grow next in the soil that you tend? Zach, if you wanted to start us off.
Oh, definitely, thank you. I think right now this past partnership, has definitely strengthened the trust among our programs and organizations, to hopefully, collaborate further down in the future, and hopefully, bring in other tribal entities and programs as well. All of our organizations are direct communities providers, and we're bringing in elders, our youth. We're mixing generations, and building new ones, building new partnerships as we go. These relationships, they help build pathways for our future and help continue the work we've already set in place. It's showing, the strength of power through unity by being together, by working together, and, leading with love and care and compassion for our people. Because, like I said earlier, we acknowledge ourselves as like one big family. We rely on each other, of knowledge, of resources, and we're daily learning from each other as we go, and that's going to continue as a community and as organizations.
Definitely appreciate that, Zach. Delores or Paul, do you have anything to add?
I would just say we want to stay true to ourselves and our core values. We've promised to keep the community involved in what we're going to do and the changes that are being implemented, but also as a group, the core group, also as far as equity is involved, seeking funding, because we don't want people volunteering their time. We believe people's time is valued, and we want to be able to pay the community members for the work that they're doing. So on our part, to find ways to find funding that may not be able to be done out of funds itself, but we can find other avenues to be able to pay the community for their work, because we'd like to start an advisory group, and our dreams and our is to have a larger advisory group that includes all communities of color, so that Paul was saying communities could help design their own what they receive, the services they receive, they should be a part of the design. And so we would love for that to happen in the future.
Thank you so much. Involving folks from the beginning at the to the end, right? That's really important. Phoebe, do you have anything to add?
I don't have much to add, just bigger and better. I think I think everybody would share the opinion that there isn't like one change or one win, that it's like an ongoing process. That you said it better than I am. I'm not going to butcher your kind of beautiful phrasing around tending to the land that we're on, but I think sounds from this conversation like so many incredible partnerships have developed that will just create better partnerships into the future, and better policies and programs as well.
Appreciate that. we're now moving into questions from the audience, and I would invite y'all to come off camera however you feel comfortable. We talked about data a lot in this conversation, and so there is a question around how has new emerging technology advances helped confront structural, functional defects in frontline communities as far as data deserts like rural areas? Does anyone have an answer to that?
I could give it a quick shot, but I missed a little bit of the first part in terms of how to address that data deserts.
Yes.
You know, three things. I'll say three things that have been, I think, somewhat important and successful are: one, there are data just sets that don't reflect the reality in rural areas, and so kind of taking a harder look at that. For example, emergency room, visits. If you live 100 miles from an emergency room, much less likely to go, even if you need to. So just really looking at the data sets and seeing if within the data sets there are populations, geographic and ethnic, racial, language that get left out. Another is just making sure that, and this is Saharnas mentioned this tool, looking at water and air quality data, making sure that the monitoring is available throughout the jurisdictions is kind of obvious, but still there's a lot of gaps there. And finally, relying on people living in the communities, kind of the local area experts, and the state has been really very, very open to this. The state of California is allowing local data to fill gaps that otherwise exist.
Thanks, Phoebe. Does anyone else have an answer to that question?
I'm not familiar with a particular technology, but one of the things that I should mention is that one of the advances that the state had in supporting some of the like frontline communities, especially on the fire areas that are prone to fire, have been using the drone systems to ensure that we get the notification in some of those communities as fast as possible, and deploying drones versus humans to combat some of those fires in the areas that are hard to reach. And most of those are like the areas that we have like rural people living there. And it has been a huge challenge for us in the state level addressing those, because in some of our like fires, we not only don't have enough housing for our own like communities to live there, when we're deploying firefighters, we have no place to house them. It's like it has become a huge issue for us statewide, especially in rural areas. So one of the things that comes to my mind immediately from the technology standpoint is this like drone technology to ensure that we know where the fire starts in rural communities and quickly be able to deploy drones for that purpose.
Yeah, and I would just add that some of us are reliant on data that's provided by other agencies or under rules that are run by others, and we need to educate other agencies, especially at the federal level or the state level, about how data is not meeting needs. It's not data justice if the community can't control its own data and see itself in that data. And we need to keep explaining that to people until we can see some change there.
I also wanted to add one more thing, which Paul's comments reminded me of. Like one of the discoveries that we had throughout the process of disadvantaged communities work at SGC was that if we really want to stay true that we want to have an equitable outcome, we should give an opportunity to communities to provide us data and alternative data that really showcases their communities' real on the ground realities. Relying us only on data that we have or is available to us is not enough. So we kind of expanded in all of our programs that this is the basis to do this, but if you have alternative data, we are happy to receive and review that and basically include that as a part of application or eligibility criteria, which I think it was a game changer, acknowledging that we don't know everything about every community.
Yeah, thanks for that. We also had a question come in about best practices for building community power. And I'm curious if we know that those practices might look different depending on if you're in a community organization or in government. So if there's folks who want to come off and share kind of from your perspective and where you sit in these partnerships, what are some of the best practices that you turn to in building community power?
I'll jump in. This is Leah. I think you definitely hit it on the head, Rebekah. Like, best practices really vary based on the specific context or goals, but I think regardless of how you approach it, it's really important to really adapt whatever principles or resources that you're utilizing to reflect the unique needs and challenges of your community, and stay really tapped into what's going on in the field of community organizing and activism. Overall, building community power it's really a multifaceted process, and it involves empowering individuals and groups within a community to really affect positive change. And one thing that kind of comes to mind in thinking of a response to this is I love that Paul brought up the data decolonization, and that is such a great way to really empower communities to take control of their own narratives and self-representation, and allowing communities to really define the data that matters to them and how it's collected, how it's analyzed and utilized. It really gives them greater agency and a voice in that decision-making process that really impacts their lives. It's nothing new, but obviously BIPOC folks have been, historically oppressed and misrepresented in data. And so I just love the intentionality behind that decolonization around data that really seeks to rectify the injustices by acknowledging those wrongs and revising the collection practices, and really ensuring that data reflects the lived experiences and perspectives of the community. I also love this shift from looking at disparities, right, and looking at what is strong in the community, what's resilient in a community. And let's see, it also allows you to challenge power imbalances. So that's always great. That's just a big aspect of social justice and community empowerment efforts. I've seen some great examples in books like The Purpose of Power from Alicia Garza, Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, and that's I'll put some books in the chat that'll just be easier because I'm really bad at remembering titles and authors. But I think in a lot of the texts there can be different subject matters, but there tends to be a variety of similar themes, especially in their focuses on community or human connection and relationships and community dynamics. So thanks.
Anyone else want to come off and share best practices that you use for building community power?
I already mentioned what we have, the stakeholder engagement process that we have embodied into our grants. But there's one other piece that I feel like is important to mention, is ensuring that we have a continuous community engagement throughout the process. So it's not only selected number of the CBOs or community members that are staying within the program and having that oversight, but also we continuously reaching out to the communities and making sure that we are hearing them. So that was also part of the Transformative Climate Communities program, requires we provide funding for continuous engagement with the broader communities on different topical areas to get like the systematic feedback from them. I definitely encourage any government entity to ensure that if there is any infrastructure investment that you're planning for, to think about other costs that you could embody into that could help the community actually feel engaged and empowered throughout the process, like the cost for community engagement, costs for ensuring that the displacement will not happen as a result of your investment, or if it's possible to see if you can have a workforce development plan as a part of any investment that you have to provide job opportunities for the people from that community to work in their community while they're developing those infrastructures. So those are a couple of the takeaways from our work within the communities. I know that not everyone is fortunate enough to have the amount of money that we had in California, like for this program, other programs that we have, although it's a drop in the bucket. But I think that if we have a mentality shift that we only pay for actual hard like infrastructure dollars, so like, yeah, this is actually a cost that should be embodied into every infrastructure investment, then I think that will be a game changer for the communities, especially communities that have been left behind for so long, to build that capacity and knowledge and continued engagement so they can shape their future.
Real quick, I would like to add to the conversation. You know, ZYP, the Zuni community, we're a tightly knit, you know, community as a whole, and by ZYP and these different organizations offering strong power building activities and events, it brings more people together. You know, one thing I like using is the word quality over quantity. If we're having so many events that aren't as fulfilling as one event, you know, people aren't going to attend as much. And, you know, the trust, you know, our community has with us and, you know, our organizations, you know, it goes a long way. They lean on us for water, they lean on us for knowledge, and they lean on us for support.
Can I just add that when we're working with communities too, that if you're going to let the community lead the work, let the community lead the work. That means we sometimes have to be willing to come hands off. It may not look like, the work may not look like what we want it to look like, but we're not getting the outcomes now that we need to. So we need to learn to step all the way back and let the communities lead where they need to. And also when we go to communities, think about longevity. That what I found working in a lot of communities, some of the hesitancy is these little grants come out to start new programs. And then they get so they've started something. It may even be working great, but there's nothing to keep it going. So when we start programs, there's a good thing from the start to start thinking about how are we going to keep this going once we get it started, so that we have programs that are started and then they end before sometimes we even get any good data from it.
I think that really speaks to barriers that so we have when it comes to this work. And so one question in the chat was around structural barriers that had to be identified and navigated from the government partner perspective. So related to compensation for the work of CBOs, where we're doing state or federal policies. And this person was thinking about WIC. And so can you all give an example of any other structural barriers that had to be identified and navigated?
I think so. I think because we're still in the beginning part of this. I mean, I can think of structural barriers that are going to be coming up as we identify some of the challenges that the community members have said. But at this point, we just identified what the challenges or their barriers were. As we take this a step forward, there are going to be challenges because, again, we have is done in a local agency level. So there's local agency problems that need to be addressed. There's state level problems that may be addressed. And then it may be like structural from the program down that need to be addressed too. And we haven't even begun to go there yet. So I can see where there's going to be some of that. We just haven't run into any yet.
One thing I'll add to what Delores said so well right there is that government is threatened to a great extent by community empowerment. It goes against the tradition of how government works. And so there's a lot of resistance, unconscious resistance, and intentional resistance to empowering communities. And if we went so far as to say the community gets to set our budget for how we do our work, or set policies for how the work goes, I mean, I think that would be really fantastic. But the chances of that happening, I mean, it relies on a lot of buy-in at the level of institutions that have never operated that way before. So I think we have to keep talking about it, and we have to keep challenging people that they can be done differently. Keep challenging, and eventually you chip away at that, the barriers will fall. But it takes a long time. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
I appreciate that. And as we see in our in general, right, the more we talk about something, the more we bring it to the center, the more that we create messaging around it, it becomes a new norm. It becomes a new standard. And we've seen that shift within our agencies and field. And so that's such a great point, Paul.
And Selma, can I just add that when we identified certain things, one of my jobs in the when we worked with the home team was to identify where the problems lie, or who could make the changes, so that we again could be transparent and say, this is something that we could actually take on. This is our body of work. We could potentially work to change this, but this body of work has to be done at, if it was a local agency, then we need to take it to a local agency. Maybe it could be added to the contract, whatever. So we talked about how the change could happen, but making it very transparent of what was in our power to actually change, or what we could work on versus what we had to work with other people on to make changes.
Yes, and I think a big thing that came out of y'all's video is the transparency that y'all had with the home team, with the community advisory team, around those changes and what you can and couldn't do, and really appreciated that. Thank y'all so much for this. This has been so rich. Does anyone have any final words that they would like to say?
This is Sarnaz from California. I would love to mention that the work that people in the government do on a daily basis can definitely benefit from the support of the community-based organizations and the stakeholders. And this is a two-way relationship. And in many cases, people in the government really like to have that engagement and constructive feedback that we can get from the CBOs. Please make sure that you reach out, you put the things that they need to attention on their radar. Otherwise, there's so much work for the public servant people that you can just be inundated on an ongoing basis and just not be able to have the bandwidth to pay attention to things that really matters on the ground. So it's like codependency on each other that I really encourage you, if you're working for a CBO stakeholders, reach out to your folks at the state or local level, make sure that they're hearing your challenges and it stays on their radar and it's being addressed, and it's not like being in the mix of everything else that they have to deal with.
Yes, thank you so much. We are nearing the end of our webinar. I can't believe it. It's gone by so fast. Thank you all so much for such a rich conversation and reflections. As we come to a close, I just want to extend a really deep gratitude and appreciation for everyone here today. So first, thank you to all of our panelists for your generosity of time and expertise. We so appreciate you sharing all of your reflections with us today. And thank you, gracias, to our interpreters, Margot Ivero. We are so grateful that you are here with us today, supporting this webinar. And also thanks to all of you. Thanks to everyone joining us. We so appreciate it. Appreciate all the questions and comments and your participation today. If you would like to learn more about the partnerships that you heard about and some of the practices, you can watch the full Powerful Partnership film series on our website, on HIP's website. And you can learn more about building power and developing partnerships with communities in some of the resources that we have available on HIP's website as well. Our power building resources as well as our partnership resources. Selma, anything from you as we close?
Nope. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Now go and be powerful.
Yes.